What's up, guys? Welcome back to Logos of God. Today we're doing something a little different. Okay, there. So today, okay. So before I said that I did not want this to be a political channel, right? And that's still somewhat true. But I've had a bit of a change of heart. There is enough of a overlap between politics and religion, and I feel like it would be remiss of me to completely exclude politics, especially considering a lot of what my last video was relating to politics. So I figured, why not just make a political video? And for today's video, we're doing a tier list of political ideologies. Let me just that real quick. Probably should have done this before I started recording, but whatever. So, tier list of political ideologies. Right? By the way, first of all, I'm going to get this out of the way. There are some things on here that don't count, that I'm not counting as political ideologies, because they're more about like social things, or like very broad generalistic terms that don't really describe specific ideologies. So alt-right, literally anything related to feminists, that's just a social construct, ideology, or centrism. Yes, here we go. Centrism and alt-right are just kind of catch-all terms related to similar kinds of figureheads within monarchical political states. Same thing with centrist, and then these are not actual political ideologies, they're more just social ideologies. Same thing with social conservatism. So we're not including that on there. Oh, also this, because I have no idea what this is, and that sounds retarded. Should I include egoism? Nah, I'll include egoism just to make fun of it. So before I jump straight into tier list ranking, is my music too loud? My music is too loud. Okay, that should be better. So before I jump straight in, let me just kind of describe what all of these tiers are going to mention. So for reference, because this is a very Christian theology-centric channel, and obviously because I'm Christian, I'm going to be very biased towards ideologies that are compatible with Christianity, right? Which, spoiler alert, that means that I'm going to be very conservative-leaning with my rankings. I also want to preface by saying that this is primarily on a practical level, and on, like, that's not, like, while I am definitely going to be, including that in my reasonings for why something is going to be higher, that's not my sole reason. The main focus of this is this ideology going to create a practical society that, gives people the right to life, things like freedom of speech. There might be some ideologies that have less so on the full freedom of speech, like we think of nowadays in America, but remiss. And proper ways to combat corruption and poverty, and preserve the state of law. Spoiler alert, that last part is going to send literally all of the anarchist ideologies into F tier. Speaking of anarchism. Oh, wait, by the way, I forgot. I gotta describe the things. So none of these are perfect. So I'm not going to pretend the S tier is perfect. S tier is like the most practical, the best. Okay? A tier is like really good, it's either really good in theory but has a track record, or like, you know, it's good but it has flaws, and then B tier is like it's fine. C tier is like something that would be very impractical, or something that's really only good in theory but is not good in practice at all. D tier is like it sucks, but like you could still make a society. It would just be it would just be very bad and very unoptimal. And then F tier is just like completely unsalvageable garbage ideology. We are not doing this. I also want to state before I jump into this, I'm an 18-year-old kid who just graduated high school. I'm about to turn 19. This is my opinion purely based on my life experience, my view of the Bible, my view of politics, and knowledge that I have from doing very informal types of research. So I'm not like an expert on like economics or whatever. So if I misdescribes one of these ideologies, which I likely will, don't give me too much shit about it. Just let me know. I will correct myself if that happens. And also don't like take all of what I'm saying with a grain of salt, as it's more of my opinion. I mean everything is everybody's opinion, but you know what I'm trying to say. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the ranking. So we're starting off with two doozies. So also, by the way, I just want to mention we're ranking a lot of the things together because a lot of these, especially when it comes to the socialist ideologies, they're more just describing the same things in very nuanced and different ways and get very hyper-specific very quickly. Right? So I might rank a bunch together because they're kind of just saying the same general thing. I'll make a distinction between the two. And we're going to have one of those at first, which is agorism and anarcho-capitalism. Right? So a lot of people are familiar with anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is very infamous for being a shitty ideology. And for good reason. It's a very shitty ideology. The idea that we need to essentially get rid of the government to have the freest market is stupid. I'm going to be honest. That's a really stupid idea. I'm really not going to touch on the anarchist ideas because I feel like anybody with a working brain should understand why anarchism, any form of anarchist ideology, just doesn't work. Okay? I will say agorism does have a tiny bit of merit to it because it tries to fix anarcho-capitalism by being more focused on bartering than just a free market. It has a free market, but it's more focused on the bartering side of it. So, cool, but like, I don't give a shit. Now, agrarianism. I don't actually think agrarianism is that terrible of an idea. Well, then why are you putting it in D tier? Well, because it's impractical. Right? The whole idea of like very like rural communities, it works on a very small scale, but the reason why it sucks is because it just cannot work on a large scale. You cannot have a large scale agrarian society. You can have small agrarian communities that work perfectly well. And you know, and that's essentially, you kind of have like what communism is. We'll talk about that later. But like, that can work on a small scale. You can have small scale communities that are just purely rural, no technology. They share everything. They live in harmony with nature, whatever the fuck. But like, you can't have a society that runs on it. That's a community, not a society. So that's not really practical. And then we're about to throw a lot of things in F tiers. So anarcho-communism, mutualism, synthesis anarchism. Actually, no. We'll save these for later when I'm just talking about pure. We're just talking about anarcho-communists. Similar. Actually, yeah, I think we're just going to talk about anarcho-communism. So, anarcho-communism. So, I don't know why there's a distinction between anarcho-communism and communism, because from what I know, that communism is communism refers to a stateless, classless, moneyless society, and what most people think of as communism is really just socialism, right? So isn't anarcho-communism just communism? I mean, the best explanation I can give for this is like I'm pretty sure it's the same kind of thing as libertarian communism, which, by the way, is a self-contradiction of like the idea of like skipping the socialism step where you have like a big government to redistribute all the resources, and then the government just kind of disappears, and then stateless, classless, moneyless society magically. But like that's not really how things work. That's kind of a logical contradiction. First of all, people are never willingly going to give up their shit, right? Which is the thing is that both like anarcho-communists and socialists are right? The anarcho-communists are right that a socialist government will never give up its power. They are right at that. That is why socialism does not work, and I'll talk about that more later. But people will never willingly give up their resources, which is why socialists are right on that front. But the logical conclusion is just that the whole ideology behind Marxism is just impractical and shitty, right? And that is going to be a very common theme in this video of a lot of basically all of the Marxist ideas are going in F or D tier. There are some that are going to go actually pretty high, but most of them are going to be very low. Anarcho-syndicalism. I actually think when it comes to Marxist ideologies that, in general, syndicalism is better. I think anarcho-syndicalism is... I'm actually, as far as I know, anarcho-syndicalism is basically just, like, getting rid of a government to have, basically, like, worker federations, like, decentralized worker federations own everything. Which, I will say, when it comes to Marxist ideologies, that's one of the better ones. It's not terrible. But it still runs into the same problems of just like, you know, when you get rid of property rights, it kind of just makes everybody poor. Right? And it's just... I would say that, like, it sounds cool in theory, but, like, it's specifically anarcho-syndicalism. Marxism in general, that does not sound good in theory. But specifically syndicalism, it sounds a lot better, and it sounds like it has a lot of the solutions to Marxism, but it still retains most of the pitfalls. And again, like, I would say it's similar to agrarianism, where it has, like, you can run it on, like, a small scale, like small, and I would say that is a thing with Marxism in general. You can run Marxist ideologies on a small scale. Like, if you had, like, you know, like individual communities can live like that. It's just that you can't have that's not a society. You can't have a society that does that. It's like, it is super, the larger the scale of the group of people you have under these kind of ideologies, the more impractical it gets. Alright, so taking a bit of a different turn, we've got authoritarian conservatism. Now, this is basically just like, I'm actually going to rank this, and where is it? Radical conservatism. These two things are pretty much the same thing. I would say that this is kind of like the Nick Fuentes ideology. And I like Nick Fuentes, but I don't agree with everything he says. This is like, I'd say Nick Fuentes is like the epitome of like this kind of thing. It's like very like far right, but not like explicitly like fascist or dictatorial. but it definitely borders on it. And I would say that's its problems, is that, like, yes, I would say that the things that is keeping these from DNF tier is that, it suffers from the similar problems as fascism, oh, when you have that much centralized power, there is no, there is nothing to, there's no balance of power. There's no checks and balances. And I would say this has some checks. This is not eradicating the checks and balances like fascism. This still retains some checks and balances to where you can have a lot of the pros of fascism, of retaining a unmoving societal, social, and moral law with with a lot less potential for abuse. But there are some ideologies that just do this way better, and I would say these are just not that practical. Christian democracy. Now, this has to go in S tier, bro. This is just basically just like kind of what America should be, of like very like secular, like classical liberal style of governmental systems, but integrated with the church, right? If we had a Catholic democracy, that would low-key be fire, I'm not gonna lie. Now, here's one of the ideologies that I think has a lot of the pros of like authoritarian right-wing regimes, but is a lot better. Civic nationalism. Now, civic nationalism is actually a pretty cool idea. It's almost like populist nationalism, okay? Of like giving, it's not explicitly consolidatory of power, which is a great thing. You can have a lot of the benefits of fascism, which is like, an unmoving moral, social, societal law, right, that will not bend to the will of the people, that will not bend to trends, right? But it has way, way, way less potential for abuse of power. And I don't think it's perfect. This is it's still somewhat of a theoretical idea, but I think you could make this work. I don't think it's perfect. I still think it is still nationalism, so it still can fall into the pitfalls of nationalism and just turn into fascism. But I think that this just is essentially just a way better version of these two. Now I would say classical conservatism is S tier. Classical conservatism is kind of like, your principal, like, moderate alt-right politics, right? So like, think of like a very right-wing republic, right? It has a very rigid, focuses on very rigid social order and governmental order, so that it will not, bend to trends, right? But it still maintains a lot of, ideas of like individuality and like individual rights and like free speech and such and such. Really, the only downside is that it can be kind of resistant to change. I would say that this and a couple other ideologies is kind of what America is close to and definitely should be in its ideal, but isn't. And there's a lot of very American ideas on here. So classical fascism is D tier. There are definitely worse versions of fascism. I feel like I don't need to explain why fascism is a bad ideology. It's not inherently racist, but it is very. It kind of is racist because it's fascism is not inherently an ethnic ideology. Not like Nazism or is ethno-nationalism on here? Ethnic nationalism is on here. Okay. Well, yeah. The problem with with this is it's kind of like, again, like these are like this slightly better version of this, because the problem with the thing that makes authoritarian conservatism and radical conservatism better than this is that it doesn't exclusively monopolize political power. This does, which means that like there's no checks and balances, so that like you can just have like an evil man just like come in and just like completely just like fuck everything up, right? And there's no checks and balances to keep that, to stop those things from happening. But it's not nearly as bad as some of the other fascist ideologies we'll talk about. Now, classical liberalism. A lot of people really like classical liberalism. I used to like classical liberalism. Nowadays, I think it's alright. Classical liberalism is like old school America, right? Think like the founding fathers type shit, right? Very, very low, very limited government, individualistic, secularized. I don't. The problem is just that when you individualize everything so much, you can kind of make the government subject to the will of the will of the people in a bad way. I don't think the will of the people is inherently bad, but when you focus too much on it, then you get like the government is essentially holds to the whims of fads, which is why I'm not really a huge fan of populism. The common saying of like democracy is all about the will of the people, but the people are retarded, right? Like that kind of thing. So I would say it's not a terrible ideology. I mean, our great nation is based upon classical liberalism, but I wouldn't say it's the most practical, especially considering we didn't stay classically liberal. I wouldn't say what we have is that great right now, but I would say that there are some things that we should move back to from classical liberalism, and some things we need to get rid of, and some things now that we need to get rid of, and some things that we need to move forward. I should have ranked this with anarcho-communism, but communalism, it's kind of the same thing of anarcho-communism, but it is strictly community-based. Which actually I think I'm going to put this into D, because it's self-aware enough to know that it really only works on a community level. But again, it doesn't work on a society basis. Deep ecology. I forget which one this is. Oh no, this is the one that was like we need to abandon all technology and oops. We need to get rid of all technology and like become a bunch of tree huggers and live with nature. Which like that no, we're not doing that. That's stupid. Okay, de-Leonism. Hold on, let me look this up real quick. I forget which one this is. Hold on. I forget which one this is. Okay, so this is kind of similar to syndicatism. It's almost like Marxist-Leninism soft. a very like soft democratic transition into a communist society instead of an explicitly socialist one. So it's like it's almost like it uses a little bit of what would become democratic socialism and syndicalism to reach communism instead of just explicitly like a dictatorship socialist regime to achieve communism. Now, again, like all explicitly Marxist ideologies, I think that just doesn't work, right? But I will say, this is one of the more redeemable ones of Marxism. Now, this one is actually very redeemable of democratic socialism. I'll put this in C. I'll put this in C. This is one of the few. This is the only explicitly socialist ideology that I think you can make work. It's, now don't confuse it with where is it? Social democracy. A lot of people confuse social democracy and democratic socialism for good reason. I mean, it's literally just the two words flipped around. Social democracy is what they have in like European countries, right? Where it's basically just a fusion of like capitalism and socialism, right? Democratic socialism is literally just a socialist government, but it is explicitly a democracy, right? So it is combining. It is a socialist government that runs democratically, which wouldn't actually be that bad because it is a socialist government subject to the will of the people. I think you could make that work. Honestly, I'm going to move that up to B tier. You could do some shit with that. Obviously, I don't think it's perfect. I mean, as with all socialist ideologies, it is not very practical because, again, you have no property rights, right? That's just, I just don't think that any ideology that eradicates property rights is practical. I'm gonna put this in doesn't count. Just I'll touch on it for a minute. Distributism is like a kind of Catholic idea of communism that is more social based than government based, but it's really has nothing. It doesn't have much to do with politics, so I'm not really gonna count it. Oh, now we got to deal with all the eco ideas. Eco-capitalism is basically just like capitalism, except it tries to run in a very environmentally friendly way, which the problem is with that is, first of all, as with all explicitly capitalist societies, there's no government oversight, so monopolies. Also, you just have kind of what we have nowadays, where it's like eco-consumerism, where it doesn't actually help the environment. It's just like kind of you slap the eco label on it just to get more sales. And then eco-fascism. This is one of the most hilarious ideologies. I looked this up today. Basically, eco-fascism is a form of ethnic nationalism that basically... It's basically the idea of like, let's create a fascist government to protect the environment and then blame minorities for the environment being bad, which is just so hilariously dumb. Honestly, that's just comedy at that point. I'm gonna save eco-socialism for later, just because it's just socialism, but just with eco thrown in it, so it's really not that different. Throw it over here. Egoism is just a form of anarchism, where it just says do whatever makes you feel good, basically. So basically, just like absurdism as a political ideology, which like I don't even need to explain why that's impractical, because like if you can literally just do whatever you want, then like there's nothing stopping everybody from going around murdering and raping each other. So that's not how that works. Now, ethnic nationalism, I'm just going to throw ethnic nationalism and Nazism in there. S tier, so funny, Giga Troll based. And I guess National Bolshevism, they're kind of just the same thing of just like fascism that is explicitly racist. Like, we are the better race, and we're gonna make a whole government that serves our race because fuck everyone else. Yeah. Yeah, and that ideology explicitly killed 11 million people. So, yeah. Same thing with Marxism, by the way. Man, what the fuck is Georgism again? You know, anarchism. It's an anarchist idea. First of all, green anarchism. People you have to. That's such a stupid idea. I'm not even gonna. I forget what Georgism is. Hold on, what is this? What is this again? I looked all of this up later or earlier, but I forget which one this is. Georgism. Oh, basically just the same thing as green anarchism. It's more like green syndicalism. I mean, yeah, fuck that. Individualist anarchism. This is just. I don't understand. I mean, this is just the same thing as egoism. Okay. Oops. Now we are going to rank all of the explicitly Marxist, or explicitly pure socialist ideologies. I will explain the differences. And then these three. Oh yeah, Maoism. Okay. So, Marxist-Lenin. These three are all Marxist-Leninists. These three are just specific implications of Marxist-Leninism. I believe this is pronounced Juche. This is the North Korean implementation, which is essentially North Korean nationalist ideology combined with Marxist-Leninism. Stalinism is kind of the same thing for these. All of these things is literally just Marxist-Leninism combined with nationalism, right? Marxist-Leninism, North Korean nationalism. Marxist-Leninism with Soviet nationalism, and then Marxist-Leninism with Chinese nationalism, right? So, yep, the problem with Marxist-Leninism of creating a socialist dictatorship to redistribute all of the money and the resources to the people to achieve communism, a stateless, moneyless, classless society, is, excuse me, the government isn't going to give up its power. And so for that reason, it just doesn't work, and it never has worked, and I don't think it ever will work. And now let's rank these four. So okay. So these are more practical. I should have ranked these with De-Leonism. These are all similar to De-Leonism. I would say I'm throwing Marx in here just because Marx didn't throw. He didn't push his ideas as far as Lenin and his his predecessors, his preceders, or whatever the fuck the word is. The people after him pushed Marx's ideologies much further than he did, and that's kind of why it's bad. Now these ones, Luxemburgism, De-Leonism, Titoism, and Trotskyism, are much more of a soft transition to communism, and so I would say for that reason they could work. These cannot work just because a dictatorship will not give up its power. but because these are a lot more soft transitions to communism, it is slightly more practical, right? They all essentially describe slightly different ways of how you can have a softer transition, whether through something like a democratic socialist society, kind of a syndicalist transfer transition state, etc., right? Titoism and Trotskyism are kind of the same things. These are just specific implications of syndicalism as a transition state to communism, and Luxemburgism and De Leonism are kind of using democratic socialism as a transition state into communism. So now we've got, also eco-socialist. Sure, like, we'll throw it in there. Hold on. Remind me what okay. Sorry about that. I had to go do something real quick. So left libertarianism is essentially libertarianism. So like, this is like traditional. This is not like anarcho libertarianism of like explicitly getting rid of a state. That's just anarchism. Just the idea of like limited government, but with like, social services and like emphasis on social justice. But like, falls into the same pitfalls as classical liberalism. I would say the only difference between classical liberalism and left libertarianism is that libertarianism is the same principles, except libertarianism is explicitly small government. Classical liberalism is not, but libertarianism is. Liberal conservatism is essentially government style of classical liberalism with a kind of social structure of regular conservatism, so like very like traditional societies, a lot more emphasis on religion, but it kind of falls into the same pitfalls as classical liberalism, just, better because conservative society. Now, monarchism. Now, this is the interesting one. Now, because it just says monarchism, there's two really like archetypes of monarchy, and I'm going to talk about both just because it says monarchy. Very ambiguous. Ambiguous. So there's an absolute monarchy, and then there's a constitutional monarchy. So absolute monarchy is like F tier, maybe D tier. It's down there, okay? Because that means the entirety of the society is subject to the whims of a dude of a bloodline with zero checks and balances. So that's garbage. Get that shit out of here. However, a constitutional monarchy is based as fuck. I'm going to put that in A tier because this is the one I want to focus on, because this is the one that I think is good. So my friend recently actually convinced me of constitutional monarchy being great because you have a king who has absolute authority, right? But you have the parliament and the prime minister that are, while subordinate to the king, they can still have. It still means that there is the will of the people, and they can dispose of the king if the king is really bad enough, to essentially act as the checks and balances. Now, and the other reason why I really like constitutional monarchy is because feudalism, when done right, is actually really good because you get like lords that it's not like communism where you get no property, but they essentially, while they own everything legally, practically you get to own your own shit, and the lords just act like the essentially protector of valuable things. Now, obviously, this can be abused, and that's why I wouldn't put it in S tier, right? And the thing is that the reason why I'm putting this so high is because when you have an explicitly Christian constitutional monarchy, that is based. That is extremely based and cool. But when you have any other form of monarchy, it can fall into lots and lots of traps. But I would say that because it just says monarchy, very ambiguous, I'm just going to go with the one I like. Now, national capitalism. I'm going to put this as C. National capitalism is essentially corporatism. It's basically just like a corporatist republic, which like obviously corporatism sucks, right? Corporatism is, a lot of people can think that America right now is a capitalist society. It's not. It is a corporatist society, right? Where we have giant mega corporations that essentially just own everything, right? I wouldn't say that it is explicitly corporatist, because explicitly corporatist has zero antitrust laws. And we have antitrust laws. But our antitrust laws need expanding upon because the companies in this world and the wealth inequality is very, very vast. And that's kind of what national capitalism is. The only thing that makes this not a national capitalism is because a national capitalist society is more just a republic and not really has anything to do with democracy. And, we are inherently a democratic society. National syndicalism. This is not great. It's just... No, actually, this is the good one, actually. This is the thing that separates anarcho-syndicalism from national syndicalism. First of all, there's a sense of nationalism, but national syndicalism is not explicitly anti-government the way anarcho-syndicalism is, right? It's, so imagine instead of like a group of syndicates that are decentralized, it is a centralized governing power that governs a bunch of syndicates, right? Almost like the way we have states, right? But instead of like, the states having their own government systems of with their own kind of mini constitutions like in classical liberalism, it's more like, you have a big syndicate organization that just owns a bunch of stuff, that you have a collective ownership for each syndicate, and then you just have a higher government that just allows for syndicates to have a large society instead of just a decentralized group of people. I actually think you can make this work. It's the only reason I'm putting it at C tier because it's still a highly theoretical idea. But I actually think you could make this one work. Neoclassical liberalism is kind of... I'm going to rank neoclassical liberalism and neoconservatism together. This is kind of like... pre-Trump GOP, right? Which is like... it's like... I would say Trump kind of is... I would say this is explicitly populist. Trump is not populist. Well, he is a populist, but he's not explicitly a populist because he's almost like an authoritarian conservative, where it's like plus populist, because he's very populist in nature, but still leans more authoritarianism. This is not authoritarianism, right? This is the only. So I would say that the only difference between neoconservatism and neoclassical liberalism is that neoclassical liberalism is like libertarian right, versus this is like authoritarian right. This is like populist. This is like populist pre-Trump, like Bush era GOP. This is like more of kind of like modern, more practical form of libertarianism. Um, but yeah, I would say they both run into problems because I would say um, that neoclassical liberalism falls into a lot of the same problems as. Um, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm trying to multitask right now. It falls into a lot of the same pitfalls as classical liberalism. What the fuck is going on? My music is being weird right now. Oh, that's why. Okay, doesn't matter. Um, this falls into the same pitfalls as classical liberalism. Goddamn. In the sense that it's overly individualistic. And this is kind of over populist in nature, and I've already explained why I don't really like populism. Neoliberalism is kind of like just the modern Democratic Party, where it's like capitalist, but just wants more taxes um, on rich people, and like you know more individualistic policies. This is just kind of like what the Democratic Party has been for the last like 30, 40 years. So it's like kind of whatever. Objectivism, this is kind of the same thing as like egoism, so I'll just put that in F tier. Paleoconservatism is very similar to neoclassical liberalism. It's just that neoclassical liberalism is more libertarian leaning, whereas this is more isn't this is not explicitly libertarian leaning in nature. Or sorry, this isn't explicitly libertarian because this is explicitly more right wing, right? This is like Reagan era. I mean, it has Reagan right there. But this is like 80s era, right? Very like anti big government conservatives, right? So think like Reaganomics. And I would say that this is not terrible, but like things like Reaganomics and like Nixon had like their fair share. Well, I wouldn't exactly call Nixon anti big government, but like, it runs into their fair share of issues, kind of exacerbating wealth um, disadvantages and lack of social services. Um, Primitivism is kind of just like return to monkey, no government, anarchy, live like cavemen. Yeah, no, that's stupid. Right libertarianism. This is kind of, I would say that this is the what like modern libertarianism is, right? I would say this is kind of close, but this is definitely what um, modern libertarianism is, right? Very, very, very anti big government. I would say to the point that it borders on anarchism. Very individualistic, very whatever. Um, I would say it's not nearly as impractical. I would say that on a similar level of anarchism, it is um, you know the larger the society you try and run like this, the less practical it will be. But you could definitely run a small scale society on this. Now, social democracy. I think this is going to be a surprise. I'm putting social democracy in S tier. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because this is the kind of government that you have in like all of the European countries, right? In like the Norwegian countries and like France, I guess you could call the UK a social democracy. Germany is kind of a social democracy, right? These countries are like consistently the most economically successful. They have great social services. Their government their punishment is way less focused on actually punishing and way more focused on rehabilitating, which is why their crime rate is so low over there, and it kind of fuses the best parts of capitalism and socialism together because there's still like private ownership and you can still like have your own company and own capital. However, there is a lot of government oversight to prevent things like monopolies and corruption and whatever. And it's basically just like the ideas of capitalism, you know, combined with the ideas of socialism, right? Because like they fix each other. This is a Okay, hold on. I'm throwing these in F tier. These are just anarchist clones. A lot of these anarchist ideas just say the same thing. I don't really feel like explaining them. Um, Social liberalism, I'm pretty sure it's just the same as. Now I'll throw it in here because it's social ideas. Third way is very similar to neoliberalism. It's kind of this is kind of like Bernie, where it's like not explicitly social democracy, but it's kind of leaning in that direction. I'll put it A tier actually. Trying to kind of a capitalist society, an explicitly capitalist society that leans towards a social democracy. And then this is basically just racist communism. I'm not joking. Look it up. It's literally just racist communism. So that's it for the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe. And let me know if I got anything wrong. I definitely got something wrong. If there are any communists that come to roast me in the comment section, cry more. Your guys' ideology sucks. But yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.